At Trinity, it was quite loudly expressed. I don't know about all the other meetings I've been to all of them, but they didn't want to be joined with St Saviour because the fear that all the deputies might be, or the representatives might be in St Saviour. And of course, in other parishes, we've got 4 linked together. You could have several parishes without any representative who can say that's our rep, and that could be. And
people are starting to question this. There was somebody at St Peter's who said, "I don't want a representative from St Brelard. I want to be able to go to the fellow around the corner."
Exactly.
But you have to... No, I was going to tell Sarah, you have to remember, Mike, we get people from other parishes come to us. We get people who avoid us because they don't particularly like our stance on things, or they don't like us as a person, for example. So there is a bit of flexibility in the system.
I want to discuss with you all about workload, what the actual workload, because that's one of the things that's being issued. But I just want to raise this issue, which I've raised and others have raised, about the fact that St Helier in this seems to get a particularly raw deal, whichever way you look at it, the Constables Inn, because the Constables Inn formula, St Helier will be split into 2 halves. The basis being that all the super constituencies will be around about 12,000 voters. St Helier will be split into 2 divisions of 12,000 voters each, A and B, but they will only have 1 constable, so they'll have, on that scheme, they'll have 5 representatives, whatever they are, deputies, each major constituency, but only half a constable each, there'll only be 1 constable. The St Wan's conglomeration, the 4 parishes put together, will have their 5 representatives plus 4 constables. Now I can't see, I've argued it with the constable who's on the panel, and she will not concede that that's an unfairness.
Well, it
seems to me an unfairness.
How's an unfairness where you can still, under that system you've got 5 deputies or members of the station you can vote for, and you vote for a constable. So you've got 6 votes. How's that unfair?
Well, if you're in St Helier, you're half of St Helier. If you're in one, because bearing in mind it's
whichever half you're in.
But that's 12,000 people. It's not half of it. It's 12,000 people.
Well, you've got to vote for 5 deputies in your section, and you also vote for the Connétable.
Right.
So you've got 6 votes.
But that constituency, super constituency, has only 5.5.
No, but you've got 6. Each individual has 6 votes.
The country parishes would have 9 people speaking for it. If there was an issue which affected fairly 4, they could have 9 people voting.
I'll tell you what, I'll support your argument, because I did the figures the other night. Yes. And again, it's down to the compromise, and it's the compromise you have to make with the constables and the parish link. I worked out the numbers the other night. I think in the 2 St Helier, the worst St Helier district, you're down to 5.5. What you consider to 5.5 representatives, and in District 5, St Lawrence, St John, St Mary, St One, you've got 9 representatives. Looking at the number of people they represent, in St Helier number 1, you've got 2,550 people per representative, and in St Lawrence, St John, you'll have 1,233, half the number. That's the compromise. I've got to accept that as a constable, because I think if you break the parish thing, you start to eat away at that system, that parish system. The constables won't have that authority that they've currently got to get things done that they can within the states. It's a compromise. I've got to put my hands up and say it's a compromise. But it's a compromise worth, I think...
Is it acceptable, Deputy? Is that an acceptable compromise?
Not the way Steve has put it forward. I think obviously if the voters won to retain the constables, I go back to my original comment where I think you have to take the proposal back and restructure to try and get rid of the worst anomalies. But if the voters won to keep the constables and the compromise is sought, as Steve says, then I think you've got to accept that part of the system in terms of the kind of electoral principles which the reform group has put forward is going to be on the surface illogical. You've just got to accept that. That's and you've got to try as best you can to structure the rest in light of those principles.
I think Roy's right. I think if you go down that route and the constables stay, it needs another think about. I think you've got to look at those districts again and go, do they add up?
Yeah.
The other thing, I just want to move on to workload if I can, because Senator, you've got the potentially huge workload, all island workload. In fact, because the Commissioner is saying that states members are going to reduce to the magic 42, which is this mysterious figure. They want to reduce the number in order that states members are more active, doing more work. You've got potentially all island representation. Is the workload there to say that you could do no more? Is there scope for more work?
Scrutiny could do a lot more. if we had everybody firing on all cylinders. I'm not sure what number the Machinery of Government Committee came up with, but we are somewhat concerned at this magic 42, which nobody can actually prove to me where it came from. I mean, under this 42, there will be 3 people per scrutiny panel, and I would have said 4 was a better number. It just spreads the burden, and it also gives a broader view, because...
And allows for sickness and other things. I notice sometimes I go into scrutiny and there's only 2 people there, barest minimum quorum. It's just hopping along, basically. And
yes, because
people do get sick.
People get sick, people go away, people have funerals.
That's right.
Or other people's funerals.
Yes.
And, you know, if we're going to do a decent job of work on scrutiny, then we do need the bodies that are actually working.
Tell us, can you tell us some secret? How much work per week do you each do? I mean,
Before we move on to that, can I just say, not only is it an issue with numbers, in terms of the workload of scrutiny, if you haven't got the numbers, then it will eventually slow up legislation, it will slow up scrutinising some propositions, and that's currently happening, and I don't think that's anything anybody wants, but that's a consequence of not enough members being available to do scrutiny on very important propositions. I don't want to see, I don't think any of us here want to see propositions put forward to the states without proper scrutiny, and we're in a danger at the moment of getting to that stage.
Well, ironically, the Commission says they want to be better and more scrutiny, but in fact they're reducing the potential for the number of people to do the scrutiny down to the absolute barest minimum, because everybody has to be there and everybody has to be a job. They either have to be a minister, assistant minister, or on scrutiny. At the moment there is some scope for people to float about doing nothing in particular, and they can always be recruited onto some other activity or other.
Yes, because Steve is on scrutiny. I have Dan Murphy from Grouville on scrutiny. I'm not sure, the 1 or 2 of the connétables are assistant ministers or States Employment Board, you name it. I think most people are doing something other than just being a connétable or a senator or a deputy. There's a handful who aren't. But basically, there is a lot to do on scrutiny. One of the things the Electoral Commission keep talking about is we must have more scrutiny on legislation. Well, actually, I've been talking to some of the law draftsmen, and I don't think it's a question of more scrutiny on legislation. I think it's a matter of having better briefs to the law draftsmen to produce better legislation. Because some of the legislation that comes before the Assembly is so appallingly put together, and it's not the law draftsman's fault, it's the fault of the people who are preparing the briefs at the very beginning.
Deputy, you were very active on scrutiny. You're now an assistant minister.
Yes.
I don't know quite what you do. I haven't seen any pronouncements from you, from your ministry on that. But
Well, because I suppose it's a terrible thing to say, Mike, but of course I'm muzzled in the sense that obviously we have collective responsibility. The real arguments largely take place behind the scenes. But let me assure you, and I'm on education, there are major debates going on. It's perhaps been a bit slower than I would have wished. But there are major debates going on, and hopefully proposals will be...
Can you
produced
reveal a little secret? Are you busier now as an assistant minister than you were when you were on scrutiny?
I'd say about the same, oddly enough, yeah. I try to remain active on scrutiny. Unlike the implication of your question, I think 3-person scrutinies are quite good. Now, Steve is on them. He may wish to comment on that. 3.
I'm trying to find out if
2
there's any slack in the system, you see, because...
Well, there are some people, as Sarah has said, who have taken an objection because they feel scrutiny is ineffective, and they basically they did it for a session or so, and they've opted out because they feel it's ineffective, and presumably they feel there are more effective ways of using their skills. I think that's a great shame. Actually, they've got a lot to offer.
Quite right. I'm extremely disappointed with Deputy Southern's rant and rave at scrutiny last week. Where did it get us? What positive outcome was there of that? Just because scrutiny goes around the way it works, for me, in a more productive way now than it did previously. You don't need to be aggressive towards ministers. In the same ways, you don't have to be in their pocket, but there's the right way to go around scrutiny. There's a professional way to go around scrutiny, and it's not about personal agendas. And we've moved away from that, and that's what Deputy Southern fails to get to grip of. Some of those people that currently have nothing to do with scrutiny, I'm desperate for them to get back involved again. There's some of my former college. I'll say I was an ex-JDA member. I would love some of those to be actually involved back in scrutiny again. But they've got to want to do it the right way. We've got to be confident that they can keep those confidentialities that sometimes you need within scrutiny. And I think there were issues around that in the past. I'm not going to point any fingers. It'd be wrong to do that. But it needs to be done in the right way, and I hope we're doing that.
I get the feeling that the politicians are wanting a system set up which suits them most, and I think they're losing sight, my own feeling, of who they're supposed to be representing. Every election time, we all want to represent me. We all don't. That's what they say. We all say want to represent you. But it seems that they're trying to tailor it to suit their own needs, rather than, and the scrutiny is a particular case in point, because you will be aware, the frustration of being a member of the public and not being able to participate. You're not able to, as I've always said, there ought to be a scope for people to comment at the end of the scrutiny meetings. They're getting more and more excluded now. There was potential before, there was some leeway, people were allowed to comment. Now it's being run very efficiently. The meetings start at 2 o'clock if they say 2 o'clock, and they finish at 3:30 if they say they're going to finish at 3:30, but the actual participation of the public is very minimal. And I think that's a whole trend which seems to be coming through this. They're trying to make it an efficiency, but the representation aspect of it, do you think there's any truth in that?
I think, no. I mean, there may be a part of a scrutiny meeting where you could say, okay, we've finished the formal business, we've had all the, invited witnesses, etc. Anybody wish to say anything? Yeah, I don't see any problem with that. But when you say it's been reduced to nothing, I'm not sure that's fair, Mike, because you can go as a witness, and if you have an interest in an area, yes, there are professional witnesses who will be expected to appear, but you can write, if you write something that's of interest, and you write quite a lot.
The first part is only the hearings are now open to the public. The other parts were open to the public.
Yes.
The first part, they're no longer open to the public.
You're talking of the chairman's
Part A,
committee
Part
and so
B. No,
forth.
all the scrutiny meetings, Part A, Part B, then used to get thrown out, Part B used to come up. But they were open to the public. There's quite a lot you could hear and learn about what was behind the scenes.
Yes.
Now you only hear the rather polished hearing. Mm-hmm. The sanitised version. That's what I'm getting. And that seems to be a trend of this commission. The whole way through they're trying to polish up government. And I don't think it's representation we're really concerned about. That's the key issue. Not just scrutiny, throughout. Do you not feel that?
Well, in terms of some of the scrutiny meetings I go to a lot of scrutiny meetings that pretty obviously aren't in public. But I feel at those meetings it's an opportunity for me and the other members to band ideas around, talk about things, discuss issues, discuss some ideas that we think that maybe a minister's got wrong. Now, I think if we open those meetings up, you're going to clam up politicians in regards to the way they think and the feelings and some of the ideas they're going to put forward. We ban those ideas around between each other. Some of them are wrong. Some of them are clearly, a bit off the wall. And I think if you can't do that in a private meeting to get your thoughts and ideas together, then I think that's a backward step.
We're running out of time, I think. I don't know what my cameraman says, but we're running out of time because half an hour is what we're going to say. Has anybody got any thoughts? What's going to be the outcome of this? Anybody got a crystal ball? Are we going to be gathering 6 large constituencies with or without constables, or isn't it even going to get that far?
I think there's going to be a struggle. Sadly, the history of reform in the States, and of course I was in the initial bloodbath, so I'm familiar.
He still bears the scars.
I know. Sadly, the history, Mike, is it starts very well. It starts with great speed and enthusiasm, but building up that consensus is very, very difficult. And so I think there are stormy passages ahead of that, I've no doubt.
Senator?
I would say it's very finely balanced. There's the referendum part of it, which, as I say, is balanced, and then whether that continues on through to the states debate, and whether members of the states actually follow the the feelings of the island or their parish.
Will their states be mandated by the island? It's an interesting. What do you think, Constable?
very much in the same. I don't want to be too negative about it because I think Electoral started off with a lot of steam and wanted and had a lot of good ideas, but I just get the feeling that it's going to literally run out of steam, and we're going to have no change, and we'll be going into the 2014 election very much as we are now, with not a great deal of change. I would like to see some, but I've got great doubts.
There's one tiny little question which I've not quite managed to work out. The 214 things are the same unless we change them. Is it planned that these changes will be effective before, or is it all going to happen after 214?
No, before.
It is going to happen.
Yeah.
However, you do have to have the sort of rider that the economy is actually far more important than reform of the states at this point in time. And looking at the economic forecasts that are sculling round at the moment, we may get to 2014 with no changes, but I am desperately concerned that the only way to cover our spending will be tax increases in 2015. And I recommend the medium-term finance plan scrutiny report to you, because I'm also very concerned about the consolidation of power within the Treasury. The Treasury should be a facilitator for the rest of the states, and at the moment it is becoming the sort of dictator of policy. And I think that is a great deal more worrying than if we're going to have the constables in the states or not. I think the economy and the coalescence of power in the centre, the fact that if you drop the number of members of the states, it's going to be very much easier to have a more supine state. I think all these things are far more important to the future of Jersey than just, are we going to have big constituencies or stay with the parishes?
Do you want to comment? We're almost out of time.
Well, I think I just want to. It's coming up to Christmas. If I've got one wish, is that for my short time in the States, is that we debate things and we deal with things that are important to the public, and not deal with minor issues or talking about ourselves. I've got parishioners that are desperately having a hard time. The economy is quite, as Sarah says, is on its knees. There's a lot of people out of work. I want to get people back into work. You know, I want to get people's standards of living up, pensioners' standards of living up. That's important to me. I don't want to be talking about free lunches and car parking and nonsense like that, and how much states members earn. I don't want to get into an argument about that. Let's talk about the issues that are actually important to people.
I think in terms of the future reform, I think Sarah's absolutely right, and Steve, back to that structure and machinery and all that are boring the public silly. And I think the only thing that will improve things is if there is a cultural change towards more consensus in the states. I never thought I would say this. I suppose, like a lot of people, I thought the best organising principle was a party system, and it probably is, but I don't think culturally we're there on the island. We're not there. But which then means we've got to look to more consensus. We've got to get more people working together, and quite rightly avoid the kind of centralisation that Sarah talked about. It is quite dangerous at the moment what's happening in the States. She's quite right.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.